There are only two things I can't stand in this world. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch.
What?
Stage 12 was always going to be a devastating day for most of the peloton. The weather was warm, the mountains were relentless, and Sky was primed for inflicting some pain. Dutchman Steven Kruijswick was 6th after stage 11, but decided he didn't want to sit by and let Sky dictate the race, so he took off on the Col de Madeleine in an attempt to shake up the race. The carnage of the day rippled through the peloton as sprinter after sprinter abandoned, and Sky got some unusual help from Movistar. On the climb, the spectators were out in force, and even the French were doing their bit to racially profile the partiers. But in all their efforts to restrain the crowd, it went for naught, as former winner and potential hopeful was down in a haze of smoke and eventually a non-starter for tomorrow. In the end, the top 3 for stage 11 made a mere result for stage 12, with Alpes d'Huez creating the chaotic and amazing cycling stadium we've come to expect. Coming up, stage 12 recap 2018 Tour de France. And welcome everybody to the Between Two Wheels podcast. This is your host Tyler Janke coming to you for stage 12, July 19, 2018, and we're going to cover one of maybe the queen stage of the tour. A lot of action that went on today, and we'll cut right to the chase. As Bourg Saint-Maurice to Alpes d'Huez, 175 kilometers. We started out at there's an HC category climb. There was a Cat 2. We had a sprint spot in the middle. We had another HC, and then another HC ended up Alpes d'Huez at 13.8 kilometer climb at 8.1%. But let's go through some of these climbs, because the Col de Madeleine came around 53, the summit of that, at 53.5 kilometers into the day. But that climb itself was 25.3 kilometers at 6.2%. So the Col de Madeleine is a long one. We had several long ones for today. That wasn't actually the longest one for the day, which was the Croix de Fort at 29K, 5.2%. And it did have a little descent in the middle of it. But, and then in the meantime, you had a little 3.4 kilometer, 8.2% Cat 2 in a sprint spot. So all that leads up to wearing the riders out, coming into Alpes d'Huez, the famous climb, 13.8 kilometers at 8.1%, ending of the day, which we had probably, wearing the riders out and getting them to the spot where you're going to see the fireworks up the last climb. And we'll just cut right to it. Steven Kruijswick comes in and decides basically to take on the day and see what he can do to put Sky in difficulty. Now, his intent, he said, was to actually take on and make get the win for the day. But the way he rode after he was actually eventually caught, which we'll get to, puts it into the mind that he still has a lot to give. And actually, if he had done things a little bit, if he was able to actually work it a little bit better, he would have been able to maybe put Sky in a little bit better difficulty. He took off on a climb. Let's just recap the day for what we had going into the start. So stage 11, 162 riders were eligible for the start. Rigoberto Urán basically has too many injuries, and he's not able to take it on for today. So 161 of them line up. As far as the jerseys go, you have Julian Alaphilippe still in the polka dot jersey. The sprinter's jersey, Peter Sagan, newly announced separating from his family. And then you have the best young rider jersey, Pierre Latour. And that's going to change up on the day. GC, Geraint Thomas, best team, Movistar, and Lantern Rouge coming in Lawson Craddock, 210 behind. Notables, we still have all the Americans in there. I'm not going to break down where they're at because they're all far back. So instead of waiting for the final punch of the summit of Alpes d'Huez, the Dutchman basically rides into the break, gets up on the Col de Madeleine. Then he was really bold and riding away from his breakaway companions. You had Alejandro Valverde of Movistar, Pierre Rollin at EF Education, Warren Barguil of Fortunato Samsic, and then you had Sky-led peloton coming after him. Kruijswick enters basically the Madeleine. He also had Hessink up there with him. And what I'm curious is, with the long valley between the Col de Fer and the Alpes d'Huez, if he had not been better off to basically have those guys with him. So he goes over he comes into the Col de Fer and he takes off and he comes over the top somewhere around the 5-minute range, and he has a long valley ahead, which is notorious for having it's notorious basically for having a large headwind, and he basically takes it on himself, and he gets his gap up to around the 6-minute range. I think that's what it was when he went over the quarter 4, and then when he enters the Alpe d'Huez, he has about 4:20 on the field. Now he's a good climber, so we'll see how that goes for him. But basically, up the climb, you then Kwiatkowski is on the. Let's go back just a little bit. So you had Movie Star come to the front once Kruijswick dumps everyone out, and he comes up to them, and or Movie Star does. They take to the front, and they start doing a lot of the work for Sky. Similar to what Nibali's team did yesterday when they were basically helping out on the front. I don't see the point of any of them doing that, and I'm curious as to why. I think maybe these teams, they get in this rut of not going for the win, but they go for a podium. So they say, sixth place you have Kruijswick. He's creeping up on ours, or he may displace us from the top 5, or maybe even getting into a podium. And so therefore, we're going to help chase. Because the problem is they come into the Alpe d'Huez, and there's 4 Sky riders left, just 4. And of those 4, they have Thomas, they have Froome, they have Kwiatkowski, and they have Egan Bernal. Egan Bernal is kind of unknown as far as what he can do in the Tour. He had kind of had a bad day yesterday. So Kwiatkowski and Thomas actually says after the fact that Kruijswick put them in a lot of hurt because he was the virtual leader on the day. Came in, I think he was 1 something off the lead. So there was a good chance that Sky was going to have to chase him down. So you come into the climb, Kwiatkowski hits the bottom. He doesn't go for very long, and he's pulled off. So now you've got Bernal. Now Bernal puts on a show, ends up pulling for around 8 kilometers, which it was pretty stellar. And it was interesting to see the other Colombians, Quintana would take off, and Bernal would just keep the pace as Sky does. They just lock it in at a certain range, and keeps reeling him back. So he actually did his job quite well. But at 5K to go, you were just down to Froome and Thomas. So you think if Kruijswick had gone over the pass with a teammate, and you see this with Alpe d'Huez when they've had Andy Hampsten in 92 winning. He did it. He was in a long day break and the win the day, or not the win, but a group the day before. Then they come into the Alpe d'Huez, and he gets in a break again. And they have 5 or so minutes coming into the bottom, but he's in the group of about 4 or 5, and they whittle it down to 3. He's got those guys helping him. So all along that valley road, there was a lot of matches that he did not have to burn, and he ends up, holding on for the win. Even in that day, I believe that was still, that was the day, and we'll actually talk a little bit about that too. Jean-Francois Bernard banging on the back, on the front there, pulling up his teammate, Miguel Indurain. Anyway, that was a time where, and you can see that with other ones where they've been able to stay away when there's a group that's able to go into the bottom, and then they don't have to burn all their matches. And Kruijswick in this term, he didn't end up doing that. So he might have been able to put Sky in a little bit more difficulty. Then you had up the climb, Kruijswick is getting reeled in. Bardet's attacking. You have Bardet, Roglic, Nibali, Froome, Thomas, Fuglsang's hanging on. He gets kind of dropped in and out. Landa's yo-yoing back and forth. Dumoulin's still there. And they get through Dutch Corner, which we'll discuss a little bit as well. And then the roads kind of creep in right as Kruijswick's getting caught, and they're going through a cloud of smoke. The whole field kind of has to collapse in around the crowd, and Nibali goes down as Froome's attacking. Now, Froome's attacks didn't seem all that potent today. They were able to bring him back. You've seen that before where he just winds up the motor, takes off, and next thing you know, he's not able to, no one's able to catch him, and he's able to take off. So maybe, and you also saw Dumoulin doing a very nice job being able to pull him back. I also saw where Thomas looked to be going onto the front right out when Bernal pulled off, which might show that he is actually working for Froome, but that's going to be a really interesting situation. So you end up getting over the top, comes together. It's and you get a little play cat and mouse here with Thomas, Dumoulin, Bardet, and Froome. Out of that field, I'm suspecting Thomas does have the best kick for that kind of finish, and he ends up winning it. Dumoulin makes comments in the press afterwards that he blew it to a little shift problem and let Thomas get away from him. But I thought Dumoulin looked very good today. Landa was just off the back. You had Roglic. So the top here you have Thomas, Dumoulin, Bardet, Froome all at the same time. Actually, and they're given a little time gap here to Thomas, Dumoulin 2 seconds, Bardet 3 seconds, Froome 4 seconds, Landa 7. So Landa, Roglic, Nibali, they were all coming back as Thomas was kind of attacking. Fuglsang then 42, Quintana. So here's some of the big ones. Quintana 47, Kruijswick still 53 seconds, which is pretty amazing. Bernal 141, Martin 145, Zakarin in the 4-minute range, along with Valverde, Latour, and Guillaume Martin was at 440. Some of the other big losers on the day: Warren Barguil, 10 minutes, Rafael Majka, 15 minutes, TJ, not that we matter anymore, but Balka Malama, they were on a group of 22 minutes back. So your overall look right now is Thomas, Froome at 139, Dumoulin 150, Nibali 237. But Nibali ended up going to the hospital, getting his back x-rayed, and I guess he cracked a vertebrae or fractured a vertebrae, so he's out of the race. That crash looked very, at first it was thought that maybe he hit a motorbike, but on closer inspection, our podcast hosts here, Chris and Curt, ended up breaking it down a little bit, and we're able to see that basically the motorcycle didn't end up knocking him down. Is what ended up, he caught a fan on the side, and so he went down. He did a little bit of a Lance Armstrong on the how to come. Okay, some winners and losers for today. Obviously, Steven Kruijswick, his stature in the sport. I mean, he had an amazing day. He took on the Big Sky team, which I think is the only way you're really going to be able to do this, is to try to wear them down bit by bit. I don't know if actually hitting these guys where it hurts on the climbs, like you saw with Roland. Not Pierre Roland, Bardet, and some of these, and Quintana. They just don't. It just doesn't do it unless maybe you get a real steep climb, which you might get in the Vuelta, but I don't think we're going to get those in the Tour. Another winner is going to be any of those sprinters out there that end up staying connected and making the time cut. You've got Demar, I think Christoph is still in there. You have Sagan still in there, but we lost a lot of sprinters. Some of those gone today that didn't make the time cut. Well, Cavendish didn't start. Neither did Kittel. Then you have Greipel, Groenewegen, Gaviria, all the Gs. They failed to finish the states. Yates was 75th at 228.54. Not a sprinter, but just going through some of the losers there. But those were the ones. So too many to mention for the losers. Iran, like I said, didn't make it. All those sprinters that got pulled out. So it will be interesting the next few days what you're going to have. Who's going to be sprinting, and who are some of those lead out guys that maybe think that they have a chance now, and they might be able to go for it. All right, some things that make you go, Well, Steven Kruijswick's move today, it was pretty cool to see, and he did put a spark kind of into the day's racing, and taking away some of that boring factor that Sky just seems to inject, and it also makes me wonder what his actual intentions were today. Like I said, when he was caught just a few K to go, he continued to push on, and he only lost 53 seconds in the end to the overall GC winner and the winner on the day. This will make you think that he's maybe still looking for the GC picture. Well, I think that's good because it gives his team still a chance. Roglic is still in there in sixth. I think Roglic is in 6th place now. So you still got a great chance for that. It was nice to see. Like I said before, I wish he would have hung on with Gesink and some of those other guys. But in the end, he got the most combative prize, and it was pretty impressive to see. One other thing, the times up Alpe d'Huez, you looked at those today. There was the winning time for Thomas would place him 109th overall. So his time was 41:16 compared to Pantani, which got a 36:50 in 1995. Now there's multiple factors that come into play as to why these times would be different. Obviously, there's the drug issue. I guess you can still think that Thomas is perhaps fueled as well. But if you just take a look at like Pantani or even Lance Armstrong, he had a fast time up there. It was a time trial, so they hadn't done, he warms up, goes up there on the time trial, the peak performance. You don't have this necessarily with today where they went over massive mountain passes. And so, but is that a 4-minute difference? Perhaps. But it's also interesting just to see the difference. It's cool to see the list of those different riders, and some of those ones in the middle there. Levi's got some strong times, and Tyler Hamilton. I've always mentioned is the drug fueled days where Hamilton's basically in an arm sling going up that climb, and they're shooting haymakers at each other and really hitting it. Everyone's just attacking like crazy, and they keep going. You don't see that as much, and maybe it's drug fuel. Maybe it's cleaner racing now. I don't know. All right, Egan Bernal. So he had an impressive day. Cycling Tips editor Neil Rogers was basically saying, he said, remember this moment when Bernal was winning his 9th Tour de France. He was done as Bernal was tapping out the rhythm on the front of the race, doing those 8K up the Alpe d'Huez. I mean, he could be right, but cycling lore is just littered with potential next Grand Tour winners that might have achieved greatness. I remember back in 1987, you have the Tour does a bunch of time trials, and they go up Mont Ventoux, and at Mont Ventoux that day they had the winner was Jean-Francois Bernard. They did a time trial up there. He wins it. He's the king of France, basically. He's going to be the next Bernardino. He's really young. He ends up not winning the Tour that year. And matter of fact, he just kind of falls off. But he does some impressive things along the way. He ends up being a teammate of Indurain, and you can go back in 1992 and watch him, 1991, and you can watch him going up d'Huez, drilling it on the front, just like Bernal was today. So, look, we never know what's going to happen with these riders. He's 21. He may be the next great thing, but a lot of people have been. Roy Nickman, he was going to be the next Greg LeMond, and he is just the next Roy Nickman. So, you never know. And the last issue for the day is how the French treated the Dutch at the Tour. There's a thing called Dutch Corner. There's all kinds of corners now where these groups get to party. There's a Dutch corner, a Polish corner. There's a Welsh corner. The Irish corner was kind of talked about by Dan Martin beforehand. I saw pictures of it as the race was going on. Pretty desolate. Evidently the fans weren't quite up there like they had been. But I heard Kaylee Fritz talking about going and visiting Dutch Corner, and basically they had roped off part of the road, so the fans couldn't get to the road. So they were making a concerted effort. But he said what was interesting is next year the Dutch were kind of pissed off about this, and they said next year we're just going to do an app. Everyone's going to join in. We're just going to change the corner. We're going to go to a different spot, because right up above their corner and right below their corner, there was no restrictions. And one of the Dutch guys is like, hey, look, we're very sensible cycling fans. The French that have the problem, they're the ones that cause all the problems. They were doing all kinds of stuff here last night. And what was interesting today, you saw in the race, it wasn't Dutch Corner that caused the wreck. It was a different one. And I don't know if it was a French corner or what, but someone took down Nibali, and they took him down at an inopportune time. And in doing so, they kind of give everyone a bad name, especially the cycling fans. At some point they may make it where that whole race is barricaded, that, climb up there is barricaded off, which will take some of the mystique, some of the excitement out of it. But you have a lot of douches up there. There was someone that looked like he was trying to punch or push Chris Froome along the way. And, hey, look, you can say all you want. It goes without saying that there's, the obnoxious American, that they talk about when you go and travel around the world. But when they're spitting, you don't have to like the Sky car at all. But when they're spitting on the car, and they're spitting on the riders, and they're trying to punch them, and they're taking them down. I mean, really, who's the obnoxious one in this world? All right, what's coming up? Stage 12 to 14, Bourg-Gasson to Valence. 169 kilometers. That's tomorrow. It's got some lumps along the way. There's a Cat 3, a sprint spot, and a Cat 4. It should be for the sprinters, but who's the sprinters? So I'm actually going to think that you're going to see a breakaway, and probably with that breakaway, you're going to, because who's going to chase now? You're not going to have quick step chasing unless they think like Urquesi or someone to take the win. You're not going to have Lotto. You're not going to have Bora Hansgrohe with Sagan, maybe some Saturday. The Saturday will be an interesting one because you have a Cat 4. It's St. Paul Troy Chateau to Mende. That's an interesting one that they've finished before. It's this nasty little, I want to say like 4K climb, 3.3 kilometers at 6.3%, finishing up to the ski area. I'm not sorry, not the ski area. It's an airfield, and it's a pretty nasty little climb. They've done it several times. Steve Cummings won up there a few years ago. He was kind of a remnants of the breakaway, and then I think you had Bardet and someone else that caught him. You've had Jalabert win up there as well. I think they've only finished up there twice. And then Sunday we have Melun to Carcassonne. It's got a Cat 3, a Cat 2, Cat 1. And that last Cat 1, 12.3K at 6.3%. But then they finish off with 30K downhill. So you're probably expecting to see Thomas, unless he just has something really bad, finish up into the rest day, which is Monday. So he should be able to make it through the weekend. And, then we'll see what we have there. What's Curt mad at today? Well, Kurt's not here to defend himself, and I can only go off of what is going on messages back and forth today. So I probably shouldn't put any words into his mouth, but he wasn't too happy with the outcome. I think it's just the boredom of the Sky train and kind of the way they're racing. I saw in the news, because all the Nibali is talking about how the racing's boring, and it's just kind of the way there is right now, which I totally understand. So the women, they're basically saying, we're not that kind of way. Watch us. I think they're right to the most. I mean, you have Bulls Doman that can kind of dominate, but when you saw the climb the other day up to La Rossière, you didn't see the teams on the front. It was this more old school, and it was fun racing to watch. So, I also mentioned the press conference that was a little overboard with the girl that was Cécile, that was like 4th place. If I don't have to endure that, hey, maybe you got me. All right. Well, anyway, episode 82, Between Two Wheels podcast. Thanks as always for joining. Subscribe, share the show via iTunes, Stitcher, Podbeam, whatever podcast service you use. And for this week, trying to stream this onto Facebook Live, but we're going to post it onto YouTube as well. So check us out, subscribe to our channels, interact with us on Facebook at Between Two Wheels, and the descriptions will be found in the show notes of the page. With that, enjoy the heat, get out racing and riding, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.